Wake.
I think the best way to describe Alan Wake 2 is that it's weird, but in a great way. Like almost all Remedy titles, it's a multimedia experience, but I really feel like this is one they nail. I remember Quantum Break having a live-action companion piece, and while the ambition was appreciated, it felt flat to me. That's not the case here, in which the live-action performances perfectly complement what happens in-game. Alan Wake 2 is as close to a perfect sequel as you're going to see, and it's really surprising because being able to bridge a 13-year gap feels like an insurmountable process, but Remedy nails it. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, and I'm not going to show the first section for obvious cheeky reasons, but here are the things that I believe make Alan Wake 2 great. So to start, let's talk about the visuals, but we're going to keep it brief, because I feel like a number of channels are going to cover this. This is probably the best looking game this generation. It is an absolute visual treat, and it's one of the few games that I remember just kind of sitting back and hoping that there was a photo mode. There isn't one. I don't know why Remedy didn't include one, but this game needs a photo mode. It desperately needs a photo mode because you will sit there sometimes and just be in awe of what you're looking at, especially when you get to the dark place. I really feel like the dark place is probably one of the best environments I've ever been to. And I love the fact that Alan is able to manipulate that environment because there's certain light puzzles that you have to work your way through. And as you work through these puzzles, it kind of changes the environment around you. And when that happens, it's just amazing about how fluid everything is. This is one of the best looking games of this generation, and I'm fairly certain it's going to stay that way for quite some time. Now that we've got the low-hanging fruit out of the way, let's talk about how Remedy nailed the shifting perspectives found in Alan Wake 2. It has got to be a really delicate balancing act because this is a narrative-heavy title, and I really feel like if they messed up at any point in time with the shifting perspectives, because you are freely able to change between Saga and Alan, I feel like if you messed up at any point in time, you could create this really convoluted mess that players won't be able to follow. But what's interesting is that you can play Saga for as long as you want, and you can play Alan for as long as you want, pretty much until you get to the end of their stories. And once you get to the end of it, they just kind of perfectly connect between one another. And I really found out that, especially as I got to the end of the game, I was wondering how everything was going to come together, especially because I had spent 4 or 5 chapters playing as Saga and telling myself that I really should shift the perspective because I feel like I'm missing out on a lot, but in reality, you aren't. The stories themselves are pretty isolated toward that character. They just have certain connections between them, and there's never a point in time where I felt like I was confused about, well, how did this work for Alan or how did this work for Saga? None of that ever came up. It's just so well handled because when they give you the option, and they do tell you a couple of times in the game, like, hey, you can shift perspectives. Don't forget that you can just go to this janitor's bucket and do it. They tell you that multiple times, but you don't have to follow it. So if you feel like you just want to continue playing Alan's story and just figuring out the dark place, you can. You don't ever have to switch unless it becomes to a part of the story where it's pretty much mandatory. And I feel like it should be really appreciated because if at any point in time Remedy drops the ball, this narrative just goes off the rails, and in a bad way. It's already off the rails, but it's in a really good, weird way. And I really enjoy the fact that instead of having this big mess for players to discover and unravel, it's actually all fairly cohesive. So the shifting perspectives in this game, I feel, are fantastic. And I think that's one of the biggest highlights of this game because I really thought it was going to be a huge mess if they missed it. For this next part, I want to stick with the different perspectives, and I want to talk about how regardless of who you're playing as, you're getting a unique experience. As Saga, her sections lean toward a modern survival horror title. You're going to have limited resources, and you're really going to need to make all of your shots count. Like its predecessor, the Taken's shield needs to be broken by light before any real damage can occur. And I really mean it when I say make your shots count, because these enemies can be fairly tanky. Always aim for the head. Now, what makes her perspective unique is the mind place. Saga is constantly trying to make sense of all the strange things happening in Bright Falls, and to do so, she visits her mind place regularly to put together clues to solve different scenarios. These sections feel like a police procedural, but as the game progresses, there are some unique inclusions, and it's overall very fascinating to experience. Personally, I love Saga as a character. Her sections are enjoyable, even if they are a bit too reliant on jump scares. With Alan, I don't think I've played a survival horror experience that made me second guess what I was seeing in front of me. His sections can be pretty anxiety inducing, and that's largely due to the shadows that may or may not attack you. You really have to play cautious at times with Alan, because like Saga, you're limited in resources, and sometimes it's just best to dodge and move quickly through an area, because if you panic, you may blow through your resources fairly quickly. The first time you're in the dark place and you see a group of shadows, sometimes it's really difficult to discern who's who and whether or not they have a weapon, because sometimes they'll just stare at you and they'll do some quick shifts in front of you, but they're not attacking you at all. So I was sitting there pretty much aiming my light at them, just seeing if they would disappear, because if they start to shift towards you, they're fairly quick and they will do a lot of damage. Alan takes a lot of damage for some reason in the dark place. Instead of a mind place, Alan finds himself in his writer's room. The big difference here is that Alan has the capability to alter the environment around him by utilizing different plot points. His sections unravel like a murder mystery, and you are completely in charge of how things pan out. Between the two, I found Alan's to be the most enjoyable, primarily because this is where Remedy really embraces the weird. There's a chapter that really reminded me of Control's Ashtray Maze. If you remember that section, it's probably one of my favorite sequences of all time. I loved it. And here in Alan Wake 2, they have something comparable because it was just unique. It was fun. But most of all, it was just weird. And I can't wait to replay this game again because I want to play that section in particular. I really did enjoy it. It kind of threw me off guard a little bit. But when you get there in Alan Wake 2, you'll know. It happens fairly early on. Before we move on, I want to talk about the fantastic sound design. I really feel like survival horror titles, the best ones, have good sound design, and here in Alan Wake 2 is no different. Like, it really contributes to the overall experience of the game. Hearing all the different whispers, whether you're playing as Saga or Alan, can make you second guess every decision you're making. It's all fantastic, and I really feel like it's going to be underrated because it really drives home how creepy some of the environments are. I feel like the dark place in particular, when you're hearing whispers of Alan to your left, right, or behind you, it is one of those things where you're constantly turning like, am I going to be attacked? What's going on? It just makes you so anxious as you're moving through all these different environments. I really hope that Alan Wake 2 gets some type of acknowledgement when the Game Awards come rolling around about sound design, because I feel like it's just such a fantastic aspect of this game, and it just really completes the experience. The last thing I want to talk about is the multimedia experience. I mentioned earlier how I believe that Remedy really nailed it here, and I really feel like this is a game where the multimedia experience actually enhances the product. I really feel like the live action stuff in this game is phenomenal. They mostly occur with Alan. There are some sections with Saga, but they're mostly like in her mind place when she's doing a profile. I really feel like they could have probably had a bit more with Saga, but that's completely fine. Most of the time when you see something that's live action with her, and this is my favorite part, is when you see the brothers having one of their commercials. And by the way, those commercials, all of them, every single one of them, they're fantastic. Make sure you stop and watch them when you can. They're just so well done, and they're so weird and so out there. It's perfect. When it comes to Alan, whenever you're going through the dark place and you're shifting the environment, he always goes into like this discussion, or he's always playing out this scene in his head. And it usually involves Alex Casey, who's played by the director of the game and the writer of the game, Sam Lake. And I don't know, I just got this real Max Payne vibe from it. And I really loved it because it's this noir survival horror game. And it's just so well done. I don't think there's a section in this game that's live action that honestly fell flat. Almost all of it is fantastic. I feel like the sections with Mr. Door in particular in the beginning of Alan's sections are always great. And they're always confusing, and they can come off as really disturbing too. I really love the fact that it's also cryptic with Alan. Like, nothing really makes sense until Alan starts to put everything together. And even when he does, you still question what's going on, because when you're going through these continuous loops and they go from live action to game, it really doesn't throw you off at all. It doesn't kill the pace. It actually adds to it. It adds to that tension. I really feel like the multimedia sections in this game are phenomenal. And I really hope that other games, especially these single player titles, start to kind of lean into it as well, because Alan Wake 2 proves that you can have mixed media and have it work out. Like, it's a real seamless experience, and it's incredibly disturbing. I feel like all the actors nail their performances. I really think it's one of the biggest highlights of the game. And it's just, it makes me want a TV series or a movie. I don't know, but I desperately want to see more of this when Control 2 comes out, and I want more of this if an Alan Wake 3 happens to come out as well. So before we end the video, I want to address the fact that I did not talk about any flaws in Alan Wake 2. Now, in the next week or so, a friend and I are going to have a review discussion on Alan Wake 2, and we're going to do a deeper dive into the game. We're going to talk about its comparison to Alan Wake 1. We're going to talk about the things we like, things we didn't like, all that sort of stuff right here. But this video was just because I beat this game and I was enamored by it. 13 years. It took 13 years for this game to come out. And not only did it blow away every expectation I had, but it literally set a standard for me, at least, to how good a multimedia game can be. The game was just fascinating to me because it really nailed the gameplay and the live action stuff, and I really feel like there was little to no flaw in that. It's a unique survival horror experience. I love psychological horror. It's what I want in a lot of games. I'm a huge fan of The Evil Within. I want more of that type of stuff, and we got it here in Alan Wake 2. So please look out for that next video for the review discussion. We are going to do a deep dive, but this video is just because I'm a fan of this game. I'm a fan of Remedy, and I really wanted to talk about what made Alan Wake 2 great. And that's going to do it for this video. If you like the content, please consider like, sharing, and subscribing. I'm Ken from Pixelated Thoughts. I'll talk to you next time.